Please welcome STR Senior Vice President Jan Freitag.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. My name is Jan. I'm with STR. We are the premier provider of hotel benchmarking services, and you are clients. Thank you. And if you're not, see me after class. I'll buy you a beer. We'll talk. And thank you to Expedia for being a client. You pay my paycheck. Thank you. We are also the provider of the weekly STAR report that you love or love to hate, depending. If you get a call Wednesday morning from your owner or revenue manager, you're welcome. So I have 18 minutes or so. I want to tell you to the state of the hotel industry in the Americas. I've broken out this talk into 3 topics: the north, the south, the middle, sort of obvious. Let's start in Canada. I had this awesome photo of Prime Minister Trudeau doing the peacock pose on his desk. Have you seen this? He's like leveling parallel with his legs up, and it was awesome because it superimposed so beautifully of this RevPAR line, and we didn't get the copyright. So here are 2 generic good-looking people doing generic good-looking yoga, but the story still holds, so RevPAR in Canada is actually well-balanced. What I mean by that is it's positive. It has been positive since 2009. The rate of growth is slowing, but the other part of it is that we're actually seeing RevPAR growth in Canada coming from both occupancy and ADR, lifting RevPAR year to date to around 5+% or so. We don't expect that to change very much. Occupancy growth is expected to continue to be positive because there's very limited new supply coming. And I guess cannabis tourism is a thing now, according to Mark, so probably something like that. Let's talk about the South. That's sort of a broad topic because I'm lumping together here Caribbean, Central, and South America into one number. So occupancy is up-ish, and ADR is down-ish, and so RevPAR is flat-ish. So, of course, your mileage may vary widely, right, because it happens to has to do a lot with the countries. So what I did here is I picked a few. This is the RevPAR percent change in US dollars. And you can see that the country macroeconomic forces really drive the specific performance, and that's down, in Brazil, in Mexico, and Peru. It's way up in the Caribbean. And I'm using Puerto Rico here sort of as a proxy for the Caribbean. As you all know, we had devastating hurricanes wash through the Caribbean last year. Hotels got destroyed, the room demand dropped, and then this year, luckily, we're open for business, and you and I and we have to tell the American consumer that indeed the Caribbean is open for business for the holiday season. But very, very healthy RevPAR growth going forward is what we're expecting. So let's talk about the middle, the US. So let me start with this. Through October, the US hotel industry had more rooms available than ever, sold more rooms than ever, generated more rooms revenue than ever, had the highest ADR occupancy RevPAR ever. Woohoo! Records, right? So amazing. So Jan, does that mean we're on the top of the hill and we're rolling down the other side? No, I don't think so. We're actually projecting pretty healthy, well, okay anyways, RevPAR growth going forward. Let's dive into that a little bit more. What I'm showing you here is RevPAR percent change back to the beginning of time, according to our founder Randy Smith, which is 1990. And what you're seeing here are the 3 last recessions, 91, 9/11, 2009. And did you see in between, we actually have really long RevPAR growth cycles. So in the 90s, 111 months, post 9/11, roughly 5 years, 102 months through August. Oh no! Tears everywhere. The analysts call me and they're like, Jan, are we going to die? Is this the end? No, it's not. But RevPAR indeed was negative for the first time in 102 months, and a lot of people got really freaked out. So what do you do in data when you're really freaked out, right? So you have the saying at STR that you have at Expedia probably on your own company. If you massage the data long enough, it'll confess to anything. So how do you make the September number positive? It's easy. You just exclude one, count them one market, right? Ta-da! And why is that? Because Houston had these huge hurricanes coming through, in the prior year, and obviously huge lift in demand and occupancy, not in rate, no price gouging. And so the reverse, the comp, of course, then means that RevPAR is down 40%-ish, and if you exclude that from the US numbers, that's a 70 basis point swing. You get RevPAR growth that's positive, woohoo! And then you get to October, and it's all smiles all the time. RevPAR is up 3.5%, back to normal, right? So when the analysts call and tell them, we're fine, you're fine, I'm fine, we're fine, it's okay. Occupancy is up a little bit. ADR is up okay, we'll talk about that in a second, is up, which gives you RevPAR growth to the tune of around 3% or so. To quote Mark Twain, the reports of my death have indeed been greatly exaggerated. It's going to be okay, guys. It's just 1 month does not a trend make. So let's dive into this a little bit further, demand and supply. And this is, if you've ever seen my colleagues or myself present at an industry conference, this is sort of like the standard STR chart, shows you the interplay between supply growth and demand growth. How many more rooms are we building versus how many more rooms are we selling? And you're seeing, again, the interplay between that and the macroeconomic environment. You see the last three recessions, 91, 9/11, 2009. And every time room demand rebounds, right? We're in this amazing industry. When things are terrible, people are like, I need to get away. And when things are great, people are like, I want to get away. And so there's demand all the time. So that's awesome. And you see post-2009, room demand shot through the roof. And then you're overlaying here in red the supply percent change. And so we as an industry, we are terrible at timing. Right? We always build into the downturn. So we're like hammering at hotels, and then the bottom falls out, and we're like, oops, well, let's keep hammering. So we open them into the recession. And then the banks are like all freaked out, and they stop lending. So what you're seeing right now is a lot of freaked out bankers that have a memory of 2009. So we're not lending a whole lot. So you see the supply percent change is actually only at around 2% or so. The long run average is 2.1. So we're basically at long run average. But the good news on this chart is that the demand percent change line is above the supply percent change line, which means we're selling more rooms than we're building new rooms. Let's talk about on the demand side. Most of the demand in the US is actually US generated, but there's obviously international arrivals. So what I'm showing you here is data from our friends at Tourism Economics. It's only through Q2. Point here is number one. Overseas arrivals are up 2.3%, but you heard Alan say, hey, total arrivals globally are up almost double that, so we're losing share. The other part is, China. China, 200 million people, they all want to come to the US. Well, so our numbers are actually only at 1%. And what's worth noting about this whole travel deal, no deal trade war, is that the Chinese have, in the past, weaponized travel. Not my statement, somebody else had said that. What they did in South Korea is they literally just said, oh, you're deploying a nuclear system to the North Korean border, no more Chinese groups to South Korea. And Chinese room demand plummeted. So it is possible that that could happen. I'm not saying it will happen, but keep that in mind, that travel can indeed be weaponized. South of the border, 10% arrivals up from Mexico, but that's a problem, right? If you close the border, right, it can't get in. So that's definitely something to watch. And then lastly, Germany. I'm from Germany, our German friends. We think we're world champions in travel. We spend more euro per capita on travel than anybody else in the world, and we can go anywhere. And we're not going to Germany. We're not going to the US. We are don't like the currency or don't like the rhetoric out of the administration, but anyways, definitely something to keep an eye out on. On the supply side, actually the story is pretty good. We can't open hotels we're not building, and we're not building anything. We have 196,000 rooms under construction. That number is up, flat, October year over year, 0.6%, and actually has declined 9 out of the last 11 months. So the pipeline is not going to be the issue, which means this next down cycle is not going to be us overbuilding. It's going to be a demand shock like it was post 9/11, post 2009. So if you take supply and demand, you put it together, you get occupancy, right? So the chart you're seeing here is the interplay between occupancy and ADR percent change. How much does our utilization impact our pricing? Or the other way around. How much does our pricing impact our utilization? And again, what you're seeing here, every time a recession hits, demand drops, so occupancy drops. Unfortunately, then also so does rate. But what's good to see is that ADR always bounces back, right? So in the 90s, to the tune of around 7% or so, post 9/11 to the tune of around 7.5%, and post 2009, not 7%. Actually, annualized ADR growth is only 2.5%. And you're saying, but 2.5, Jan, that's not bad. It's not 0. It's like, yeah, so let's talk about that. So this is sort of fuzzy math, so bear with me here for a second. But what I'm doing here is I'm creating real ADR growth. I'm taking the top line and I'm subtracting the rate of expense growth. And as a proxy for the rate of expense growth, I'm using CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which is not true quite because hotels don't buy cars or TVs or diapers, but you get the idea, right? The idea is that our expenses grow at a certain pace and our revenues grow at a certain pace, and you want there to be a delta because that's your profit. And you see over time, the industry has loved inflation. We've always outpaced inflation, except in recession, at a really healthy margin, like 4.5% or so, except if you look on the right-hand side, wow, that's hard to see. There's almost nothing there. Well, turns out in Q3, real ADR growth was actually minus 0.5%. CPI grew faster than our top line. And that's a problem. Right? Part of this problem is we're trying to answer this question. Who will clean all those rooms? Right? We have, in the United States, roughly 1 million jobs open in accommodations and food service. What does that mean? That means that we're absolutely positively going to see wage increases. Right? To the tune of around, so far year to date, 3.3% or so. So if our top line doesn't grow any faster than that, what that means is that our profitability is going to get hit. So if you do a data presentation, you've got to show your kids. So I have 2 boys. Owen is 2.5. Liam is 10 months. And this is the moment when he came home. Liam came home from the hospital. And we call this photo the exact moment when both boys realize that they're not the only son in the family anymore. But I also thought, this is actually a really good overlay to where we are, in the industry. The owners are crying, because their profitability is dropping, and they're like, what's going on? This isn't fair. I'm sad. And the brands are like, I'm not crying yet. I may be crying soon. I think I'm going to cry. And there were tears. So, I think this is sort of the outlook when you look at a profitability GOP level going forward, unless we get costs under control or drive our top line further. Let me give you a forecast for next year. This is our top 25 markets. And you see, wow, green everywhere, right? So 24 of the top 25 markets are growing ADR. Exception, Minneapolis, because why? They had the Super Bowl in 2018, and now how are I going to get all these thousands of people to Minneapolis in January? You don't. Sorry, no offense. It's just really hard, right? So what we're going to see is, unfortunately, the negative comp that's going to wash over Minneapolis like an ice storm, I guess, so for the remainder of the year. But overall, you see in the top 25 markets, life is actually pretty good. And then for the total United States, we're seeing U.S. RevPAR outlook. I'm saying okay, not great. So it's fine, It's positive. It's okay, but not great. So this year 3%, next year 2.5% or so. Your mileage may vary. I wish you more than that. This is all coming from ADR growth, by the way, because we're running the highest occupancies ever, and so it's really hard to grow that. So that's sort of the formal part of my presentation. Let me end with this. You've never seen this unless you follow me on Twitter, and why would you? So I went to a data visualization conference, nerd, and Alberto Cairo was the professor, and at the end he's like, hey, here's some free software on the interwebs, you should check it out. And I'm like, oh, this sounds kind of cool. So what it is you can plot locations over time. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So we have a pretty sweet hotel database, right, as hotel databases go, and we have open dates. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Let me take every open date of every hotel in the world and then break them up, or take that long, and then break it up by brand, which is blue chain, versus independent, which is orange. And then I can sort of chart over time where hotels open. Oh, that's cool. So I think this is cool. I made it myself. So just look up from your phones for 1 minute. This literally only takes 1 minute. Let's roll. So we're starting out, it's basically 50-50 in the 70s, in the 80s. You see that the blue dots are mostly in North America, and there's a lot of independent properties in Europe, and some in Asia, some in Australia. Not a whole lot going on in sub-Saharan Africa. A lot of independent properties in Latin America. And that is sort of the tenor of what's going on in the United States. A lot of blue and some red and some orange in the Caribbean. The recession of 1991 happened, and after that, bankers are like, hey, we really prefer the brand. So you're seeing the blue line pick up, and then they're going into Europe, and you're seeing some smaller regional chains emerging in Japan and in Asia-Pac. 9/11 happens again, a small hiccup in the brands, but then after that, you're seeing that the brands just proliferate, and you have smaller regional players in Latin America, in even South Africa, in Australia, and then in 2009, the emerging middle class of India, of China, in sub-Saharan Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the future is bright. Whew. That was fun. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, I'll be at the bar. Have a good night.